Good evening and welcome to Building Strength Webinars. I'm Marian Booker, and we're going to talk about the ear-brain-body connection, why sound matters and how to use it to improve your brain function. First, we want to thank Dr. David for giving us the opportunity to bring and listen to his online community. We appreciate it very much. My name is Marian Booker. I'm a craniosacral therapist, a homeopath, and an Enlisten consultant. And that's kind of an interesting collection of skills, I guess. So I'll tell you how I got here. I was a systems analyst working, being a computer jockey until I had children. And I stayed at home to raise them. Turns out that one of our sons is a special needs child. And so I started looking for help for him, and I found that conventional medicine really had nothing to help him except drugging him to where he wasn't a problem to the teachers. So I began to search for answers on my own. And I found 4 treatments that helped him a lot. One was sensory integration therapy, which I had a very good pediatrician who directed me in the right direction to speech and language therapists, and we wound up with a sensory integration therapy. After that, I discovered cranial manipulation, and it came as quite a surprise to me to find out that the cranial bones move and they throughout life, and if they don't, it's going to cause you trouble. Homeopathy helped my son, and I went to the first homeopath in England, and then after those 3 things I discovered listening training. And they say if you look hard enough, long enough, you may find what you're looking for, and I believe I did. I trained in 3 of the 4 therapies, in craniosacral therapy, homeopathy, and in listening training. You may wonder what craniosacral therapy is. Well, according to the Upledger website, because I'm trained by the Upledger Institute, CST, as we call it, is a gentle, light touch method of evaluating and enhancing the functioning of a physiological body system called the craniosacral system. Now, in your textbook that you might take for anatomy and physiology in the United States, you won't find this system, but you will find it in textbooks in Italy and in Israel, because it has been an accepted bodily system for a long time there. And it's as it becomes more well-known, textbooks are going to change. By light touch, we're talking about the weight of a nickel. We put about the weight of a nickel on your head or your body to get started. And this helps release restrictions that are found in the membranes that hold the cerebral spinal fluid and protect the brain and spinal cord and elsewhere in the body. The goal of the treatment is to improve the functioning of the central nervous system. Homeopathy is a branch of alternative medicine which uses specially prepared minute doses of natural substances to treat illness in people from infancy to old age. By specially prepared, they are extremely dilute, and between each dilution they're shaken very hard and it liberates a new property of matter in them, we believe. But we can use everything from common table salt to the picture here is actually a daisy. The daisy and that's a very good remedy, Bellus perennis, for people who've had abdominal surgery of all things. After careful case taking and evaluation of symptoms of a client, a medicine is chosen that matches his symptoms. We have more than 2,000 medicines in our Materia Medica. And the goal is to create sustained clinical improvement in the client's health. Now, let's talk about Enlisten. What is Enlisten? It is a computer-based program for listening training that provides sound stimulation to the clients using the music of Mozart and other classical music. We have some Haydn or some Handel, and Gregorian chant, children's music and other stories, and the client's own voice. And sometimes we use the client's mother's voice. We use Mozart, we use Gregorian chant, not just because somebody liked Mozart and Gregorian chant, but because they have been shown through experimentation to be the music that works. The sounds are filtered electronically. This is the screen that you'll see on an Enlisten computer, one of the screens that you'll see. That's the screen that you just push the button like on a recorder to play. They're filtered electronically to provide the stimulation to the client's ear and brain and to remove distortion in perception. And I'll clarify that, and my colleague Bob will also explain how this distortion is removed. The music and stories are delivered to the client through studio headphones, which provide both bone and air conduction. These are open air studio headphones, and right back there behind the right ear there's a little device that sends sound through the bone it's a little vibrator that touches the back of your head on the mastoid bone, and it sends the sounds also through the bone at a slightly different time than the air conducted sounds are coming through. And that is a very, very important part of Enlisten. Enlisten has a variety of adjustments that can be combined in an unlimited number of ways to give you truly personalized, effective programs for listening training. We've got filters and delays and all sorts of electronic stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Why do I need listening training? I can hear just fine. I've heard this many times. I have to explain that hearing is different than listening. Hearing is simply the passive reception of sound, and it's the thing that the alarm clock uses to wake you up. You're not listening for the alarm, you just hear it. If there's a bell that goes off declaring that there's a fire in a building, or a horn honking, or the clanging bells at a railroad crossing, you hear those. That alerts you that something is going on that you should now attend to, and then you start listening to see, I hear the clanging, what's going on? Where's the train? So there is a difference between hearing and listening. Listening is the active ability, intention, and desire to focus on sounds we want to analyze and reject the ones we do not want. The intention is a very big thing here. It's when you think about a child in a classroom, he'll be sitting there and the teacher is talking, and of course we believe that the teacher is what you go to school to listen to. But a child who can't listen effectively will be distracted by the sound of another child squeaking in his chair, or the sound of a pencil dragging across the paper, or somebody coughing, or somebody's shoes shuffling on the ground. To a person with inadequate listening skills, all of these sounds will have equal importance. To train listening will help him focus on the important one and tune out the rest. Listening is the foundation for competency in speaking, reading, writing, and social interaction. It's through listening and mimicking that we learn to speak, and it's through listening that we communicate with the outside world. And it's the most basic skill. It's not reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's how could you learn reading and writing if you couldn't listen effectively first to get the instructions for these things. It's the first to be developed in language. Of the 5 special senses, the one that's ready to be used first, and I believe the only one that's available in the womb, is hearing. And as we see from this little guy in the womb, he's already tuning into mom. He's listening to her digestion and her breathing. And as he gets larger and larger, he'll start actually having bone-conducted sounds coming through as his body takes up a lot of space inside her body. And he'll start getting a very clear perception of what her voice sounds like, and that'll be very important to him after he's born. Listening is the foundation for all communication and learning. And here again, if you can't listen well and make sense of what you hear, your learning is going to be made more difficult. Listening is a skill that can be both lost and recovered. And I'll talk about how, at the functional level, good listening requires control and harmony between the cochlear, which is right here, and the vestibular, which is back here, the semicircular canals in this part, vestibular portions of the auditory system. This is an ear. What happens if you get a middle ear infection and there's a bunch of mucus in here? It's going to keep the eardrum from vibrating properly. It's going to restrict the movement of the little bones that are back there, and you will have an improper connection between the outer ear and the inner ear. So at the functional level, something like an infection can mess up the process. At the emotional level, the desire to listen can be detrimentally affected by illness, accident, or one's environment or experience. One of our colleagues out in California has worked with near-drowning cases. Think of what would happen to you if you witnessed a crime or were the victim of a crime. That might cause you to withdraw inside of you, make you fearful, and make you not want to interact with the outside. A serious illness can make a difference to you, and of course, I've got a soldier here who sees and has to do all kinds of things in his daily activities that he may want to shut out later. And at the relational level, people who experience confusion in their environment may turn away from their family, schools, or peers. And this might have been a picture of my son when he was in grade school. The noises from the class for him were just overwhelming. And when the kids would be required to sit in a circle at circle time, they all sat in a circle facing inward, and he would sit in the circle facing outward just to make the experience of being with that many people more tolerable. And listen retrains the ear and stimulates the brain with programs for passive and active listening. Passive through the ears. Active is when we put a microphone into your program. Listening, this will help with your learning, attention, creativity, and coordination, and that's not all. The coordination happens because of the stimulation goes to the hearing side, the cochlea side of the ear, and at the same time it goes to the vestibular side, the semicircular canals in the vestibule. And listen trains the human ear to acquire, develop, and refine one's listening function with far-reaching benefits. And to me, this little clip art picture kind of shows two guys being human. They have friendship with each other, they're chatting, they've got interaction, they're not alone in the world because they can listen well. And Listen provides personalized listening programs which change your listening, and this can change your life. And in a few slides you'll see some lives that have been changed. What do I mean by personalized program? Well, the client will complete a comprehensive questionnaire. The Enlisten consultant will use it, and then in person we do laterality testing, which tests to see if you have a good lateralization of your use of your arms and legs and ears and stuff, or do you listen with your right ear and look with your left eye and write with your right hand but eat with your left. We do drawing tests which evaluate your vestibular process or functioning and various things, and a listening test which is done with an audiometer, just like an audiologist uses, but ours tests your listening, which is how your brain processes sound. It's different than hearing. And we use all these things to design a listening program that will accomplish the desired goals. There are some listening programs available that will give you 3 CDs and a set of headphones and say this is a listening program, but it's just canned. This is, we fix this program to fit precisely what you need. What is a listening test? A listening test, or we call it an LT, uses an audiometer, as I said, to test how your brain processes the sounds. It tests air conduction, in other words, how do you perceive the sounds through air, and the spatial errors when we're playing the sounds in one ear, do you hear them in the other, or can you not tell where they're coming from? Bone conduction, the same. We put a little vibrator on that causes the sounds to go through your bones, not through your ears. And again, we check to see if you're hearing it on the proper side. Pitch discrimination, can you tell which tone is higher or lower, or are the tones the same? And this has a lot to do with being able to tell the difference between sounds such as zzz. Those can get muddled up when you don't have good pitch discrimination. We test ear dominance. We like you to be right-eared because neurologically, the right ear connects very directly to the language processing centers on the left hemisphere of the brain. And if you are left ear dominant, this will slow down your processing. It'll take a little while for the word to get from the left ear over to, and it has to cross back over the corpus callosum to get to the listening centers, and that takes a little bit of time. And in terms of neurological time, it's an eternity, 4/10,000ths of a second, but it makes a difference in your ability to perceive. It can also give you a psychological distance from people. And if we get your right ear in to be your dominant ear, your life is going to be better. And then we also test the relative sensitivity of air and bone conduction. We like the air conduction to be more sensitive than bone because we are not fish. We listen to words through the air. And so if the bone-conducted sounds are more sensitive, it'll be kind of like your ears are underwater, or like those old Charlie Brown cartoons where the teacher goes, wah, 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 wah. We always say that that's the way you sound, you're listening when you hear it through the bone in preference to air. This is a hearing test graph, and I don't know how to do a hearing test, but I do know that they test to find the softest sound you can hear. And this is a listening test graph. As you can see, we have a blue line here which represents the air-conducted sounds. The red line represents the bone-conducted sounds, and this person has bone above air in some places, air above bone in others. This person has some trouble determining which side the bone-conducted sounds were heard on. There's a little bit of difficulty here and here to determine which pitch was higher, lower, or the same, and this person is slightly right-eared. So from this we can evaluate, we see where they start, and we can see what we need to work on. If we want to get this air line to be above the bone, we'll emphasize frequencies between 750 and 2000 or 3000 and say, listen to this in their program, and it will gradually raise that line up, and it will make them be able to hear better and respond to speech better. An ideal listening curve, which comes along every now and then, would have this sort of general shape. It comes up, and in the language areas between 750 and 3000 or 4000 is where we would want it to peak, and it can drop off a little bit in the higher frequencies. And then we would want the bone-conducted line to be about 5 decibels below. This would be an ideal listening curve in each ear, and this ideal listening curve, an ideal listening person would already be right-eared. And listening programs are infinitely variable to help clients who need to develop foundational skills. That means toileting, balance, being able to get up off, being able to feel comfortable with gravity, and developing language if they are nonverbal. And it can help clients who perform at a very high level already, can sharpen their performance, they can experience personal growth. It's interesting because the first use of listening training was for helping opera singers who had lost their pitches. And of course, an opera singer is a finely tuned musical instrument, so it was to help already capable performers. And then they found that they were feeling better and feeling smarter, and they had kids with trouble in school, and they said, hey, you think this could help my kid? And that's the way listening training got its start and has spread to, as we've found, areas where it can have application. For the gifted and talented, there's accelerated learning. We can help with creativity and artistic expression. If you want to be a better violinist, or if you want to, if you're an actor and you perhaps want to pick up a really good British accent for a part, helps with goal achievement and academic achievement, sports performance. Because of the vestibular stimulation, you can develop more comfort with your body, and so your sports performance will improve. And if you're an executive and in a competitive arena and you need to, looking for the next promotion, we can help you sharpen up to where you might be more competitive. On the learning challenges side, when there's obvious problems with early learning, with lack of speech with children who cannot seem to get toilet trained even till they're 7 or 8, and Bob will talk about that. Kids with balance and coordination problems, and if you've got a sensory integration kid, you probably know about the need to conquer gravity, and when you see a kid walking with a wide-based gait, it's because they're not really firmly comfortable with their ability to fight against gravity and be upright. Reading, writing, and spelling. Spelling actually changes because when we get the selectivity right, you can hear how the words are said, and thus you can figure out what letters you use what letters you use to write them. So that's how that helps. The ability to handle change. In my own son's situation, just saying, hey, let's get up and leave somewhere right now. This is difficult for him because he has had a rigid neurological system, and changing was frightening. But we can soften that. We can make it work better. Or at any age, overcoming a history of failure. Filters and scans and delays. Oh my. Well, we have filters and we have scans. We've got 33 electronic filter choices, or you can have no filter. And on the Enlisten screen, we set them, and you can see during your program, you can see whether you've got a high-pass filter, which means anything above a certain frequency, a low-pass filter, which is anything below a certain frequency. Band pass is between two frequencies. You'll only hear the sound, say, between 750 and 3000 hertz. We can scan up and down through the frequencies. We can vary the bone and air conduction. We can raise the sound coming through bone, and turn the air completely off if necessary. We can use variable equalizer slopes, which means sometimes the treble is one way and sometimes the bass is one way. And there are delays and holds between bone and air and between the gating, which Bob will talk about a little bit. But if this doesn't just makes your eyes glaze over, don't worry. We write the program. You don't have to worry about it. You just put on the headphones. So what happens when you listen to your personalized Enlisten program through these really great headphones? The music vibrates the eardrum right here and works the muscles of the middle ear, and that sends pressure waves into the vestibule, which propagate into the cochlea and the semicircular canals. And that displaces the fluid that's in the labyrinth, the entire bony labyrinth. There are neurons in there that are activated when these pressure changes come through, and then they send electrical impulses up the vestibular nerves and the cochlear nerves to the brain. One of those three little bones from the middle ear, the stirrup, is what attaches right here at the oval window, and it presses in and out as the vibrations from the sound go in. And you'll see this pink fluid. Generally, people talk about the cochlea, which is the snail-shaped thing, but exactly the same fluid, as you see this little canal here, is present all the way through these semicircular canals, which is kind of like your head's gyroscope. It tells you which end is up. And all of this gets vibrated at the same time as the cochlea. And that's where the magic happens for balance and coordination. The vagus nerve is also stimulated during your listening training. And that has far-reaching effects. There's a branch of the vagus nerve in the ear, and it goes through all levels of the brain. It goes to your pharynx, your larynx. It goes under your aorta, to your hearts, lungs, intestines. Some people feel gurgling in their abdomen when they're listening because the vagus nerve goes everywhere. Vagus means wanderer, and as you can see from this little chart, it goes just about everywhere. And it's going to be really interesting when you get down here in the colon and in the pelvic area. Bob will tell you why that's important in just a few minutes. I've got some case histories here, and you'll remember that ideal listening curve, and you might recognize by now that this is not an ideal listening curve. In fact, this child has an almost 70 decibel difference between her bone and air conduction, and it gave her great difficulty in her life. So this was her starting listening test. And sometimes when we're working with a client, we work with art. We have, we'll suggest that they draw their resources. What do they have that helps them, whether it be a supportive family or their ability to drive or, whatever they want to draw. Or you can say, draw what you needed to have. If you had been born and everything had been perfect, what would you have needed to make it perfect? So I asked her to draw what would have made everything perfect. And this is what she drew. Obviously, she likes San Antonio, and she's got a lot of her friends here, and it looks to me like she needed a swimming pool. And as we worked with her, I was trying to ask her questions, but she was not very cooperative at the beginning, and I'd say every day, how did your day go? And she goes, bad. And I had to just pry every word out of her. As we went along, I asked her to do this and that with the drawing, and as you can see, she was giving me stick figures and a lot of smiling faces. She obviously likes her friends, but there wasn't a tremendous amount of effort or engagement that went into these pictures. But she was talking to me when I would ask her about the upheaval that she felt inside and how the various things that would happen, and then all the drama would start. And I said to her one day, draw the drama. And when she drew the drama, and we can see after 12 hours of listening, there's getting to be a little bit of a change here, but we weren't getting a lot of that. It was after this that I asked her, draw the drama. And this is what I got. Her listening test is changing, and she's softening. And as it changed, her artwork helped her express her deeper emotions. She was drawing, and each color represented a different mood or emotion. Black is crazy mad, red was anger, blue is sad, this lavender is feeling good. And I asked her, tell me more about this crazy mad. And this is what she drew. And I said, how does it get to crazy mad? And so she showed me that there's an intersection that when she gets sad, which is blue, certain things can happen. She can choose to be joyful, or she can go to angry, or she can go to crazy mad. I don't remember what green is, I'm sorry. But she said that there's kind of a decision point or an intersection where she feels things could go in any direction and then they go in one of the directions. So I asked her, tell me more about this decision point. So she drew this, and she explained how the emotions came and how they could go this way or that. But as you can see the difference in the quality of this picture and the engagement of these pictures, we're not teaching art, but her listening helped her express all this through her art, and it started to change her emotional life. Toward the end of her first intensive, which is 15 days, 2 hours a day, she drew this picture, which has pictures which represented her hope for the future. And she told me when she started listening, this much was no hope. But she said, now all of this is hope, and this little area down here is no hope. So this is her listening test after 30 hours. It's still got a bit of a gap here, but it's closing. And then we do a break for integration. When you've finished your 15 days, you take a 4 to 6 week break for integration, and then you start up again. And during that 11-week period, or in her case it was 11 weeks, you can see her listening test changed even more, because we start the ball rolling and then, or the wheel turning, and then it keeps spinning for a while as your body integrates all the changes that we've started in the listening. And after 50 hours of listening, you can see that we've got her air conduction, above bone conduction all the way across. It's smoothing out. It's getting a smaller gap. This is where she started. This is where she was after 50 hours. And listen can really make changes. Another thing was, you see all the selectivity? She had a difficulty discriminating between pitches in every single category, and in 50 hours, all of those difficulties had cleared up. I had a 28-year-old man who wants to learn, but he has had extreme confusion in many areas. He had extreme difficulty with his life. He was still living at home, not because he's lazy, just because the world doesn't work for him. He's confused when talking, and when he was asked questions, he can't remember his daily schedule. He gets traffic tickets all the time. He has years of difficulty to overcome. These were his drawing tests at intake. There's no tops on his trees. They don't really look like trees. And I tried to get him to draw his resources at the beginning. I drew, and he just couldn't do anything with the page, and so I drew this circle and said, well, start with that, see what you can do. And he did these little doodles, and after a moment he said, I can't, like I had asked him to lift a Volkswagen. After 90 hours of listening, I said, you want to try drawing again? And he said, yeah. And this is what he drew. And he explained how this picture, has this tree that grows toward the sun, and the sun is nourishing it. And he talked about the reflection of the sun on the roof. But you'll notice that he's got a top on this tree. But he said that the sun was like knowledge, and this tree is leaning toward knowledge, and he's like that tree. He likes to lean toward knowledge. The next day he drew this one. You see the three-dimensional aspect of it. He was drawing this oil flask and was talking about how oil is like knowledge, and you need a container that will hold it, and he needed knowledge to fill him. And then he drew his table for studying and his chair for studying. And then I commented on how he was shading, and I said, how do you do that shading to where you can tell the depth of things? And so he drew this can and showed me, and then we were chatting about pomegranates. He drew a pomegranate. And then he went back up here and worked on this. And if you feel this picture, run your hand across it. This is very, very thick. I asked him, what's that? And he said, that's a cork. You need a cork to keep the oil in. And I said, do you have a cork? He said, yep, I just got it. And there are his trees. He's got a top on his trees. He doesn't have a leak out the top of his head anymore, is the way I interpreted that. And this is a crepe myrtle. This is his drawing as it becomes more expressive, and it becomes more colorful and creative. And he is now studying art in college. He's graduated from junior college and is taking art in university. I had a 7-year-old girl who had learning difficulties. She nearly failed kindergarten and first grade. Her mom and grandmother shared her because of her mom's work schedule, so she actually lived in 2 school districts, and they moved her to the grandma's district to avoid her being held back. And I was her tutor for reading, and her teacher told me that she's like a Christmas tree with the lights blinking on and off. And she couldn't sit still without wiggling. It was like having Tigger sitting there in the chair across from me. And she was very manipulative. Her mother and grandmother said this was a problem, that she was manipulative and pouty and a very poor loser when playing games. So when I did her intake for her reading intervention, this was her handwriting, and as you can see, it's pretty much of a mess. But after 2 hours of listen, her grandmother met me at the door with this piece of paper and said, we have never seen anything like this before. She sat upstairs happily singing, and all this fa la 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 la, and God we love you so much, 'tis the season to be jolly. Her grandma and grandpa were just having a great time listening to her. But what happened to this? We didn't teach her penmanship in the first 2 hours. It was the vestibular stimulation that gave her better control of her hand. After 60 hours of enlistment, she was reading voraciously at the 3rd grade level. She now does math in her head that she couldn't do with her fingers and toes. And if she loses in a game, she says, oh, well, there's always next time. I have another 28-year-old man. At the time that he started, he had lifelong learning difficulties and no prospects for the future. His learning problems started when he was very young. His school failure was a problem. His grandma was a teacher, so Mom and Grandma decided they would homeschool him. She was a qualified teacher, so it wasn't like he got a bad homeschooling situation. He struggled throughout his school life, and Mom is a tough love type. She finally sent him to military school in New Mexico. He's got a great personality. He's great with people. He has problem solving or ability to defuse situations. and he wanted to be a police officer, and they wanted him to be a police officer because they said he could deal with hostage situations. He's got such an ability to communicate, but he couldn't pass the employment tests. He can't keep a job with the future. The kind of job he had was always busboy or dishwasher. And he said he's felt like a victim his whole life. This is his first listening test. This is thanks to his brother who fired a gun in the house. This is Alaska. You have to pardon them. He fired a gun in the house a little too close to his brother's ear, and there's actual hearing damage here. But and here's his drawing test at intake. But as he did his listening, on the very first night of his listening, he had a dream, and the next day he reported that he had beat up his brother in his dream. And I thought, oh, we're going the wrong way. But he told me that he had had victim dreams his whole life, and so from the time he was little, all of his dreams were of kids stealing his lunch money, kids stealing his lunch, kids taking his trike. As he got older, people stealing his car, people pulling him out of his car at a stoplight and throwing him into the street and taking his car, and his brother beating him up. Well, in his dream, he beat up his brother finally, and then he started having victor dreams every night for months, and I just loved listening to these dreams. They were everything from him flying over the world to being stuck and having people come to help him, or being in a position where somebody was trying to victimize him, but he was able to respond in a positive way and win. He began to feel optimistic. He began to organize his surroundings, which were a pit. His mother said that his bedroom and his clothes had always been on the floor before, but now she said his dresser looks like a Nordstrom's display. And during one of his breaks for integration, he came up with a big idea. After 60 hours of Enlisten, this is his tree test. You can see that there's something changing. This is a bigger, more confident tree. It's not hiding off in the corner anymore. Now he's working with his uncle as a cabinet maker. His uncle's been trying his whole life to teach him cabinetry, but he couldn't figure it out. He wasn't coordinated enough to use the saw without cutting off his arm. He couldn't remember a single measurement before. He told me the frustration of trying to write down a measurement, and then he couldn't find his pencil. And then when he found his pencil, he had lost his paper, and by the time he found his paper and his pencil, he had forgotten the measurement. But now he can remember 4 complex measurements long enough to walk across the room and write them down, and he knows where his pencil and tablet are. And he said his mom told me that one day she came home and he had read a book on his own for the first time in his life at about age 30. And now, remember how I told you how Enlisten can change your life? He is an inventor. His big idea was worth a U.S. patent. He has another one in process. He says about Enlisten, and he told me to tell you, Enlisten made me me. It helped me put the scattered pieces of my puzzle together to make my puzzle complete. Look at a person as a whole. No matter how hard I tried, no matter what I did, I could never get all the pieces of my puzzle together. Now everything is lined up and locked together, and I'm cruising. And he is now on Yukigassen Team USA. Yukigassen is a regulation snowball fight that originated in Japan, and his mom said that he had always been clumsy and was never in sports. He would always be the one that got hit in the head with the ball. But this is him now, and he is one of the major strategizers on the team. So everything has changed for him. And this is a picture from February 2011, and they won again in February 2012 and have been invited to Tokyo to do Yukigassen there. In my own family, my first use was for listening training was my older son, but my younger son was packing along with me as I took the older one all over the world looking for help, because we lived in Saudi Arabia, and so all the world was under my wheels as we were flying home. And one time I asked my husband, what do you think? Should I let him, we're going to do this thing with the headphones? And my husband said, well, putting headphones on certainly couldn't hurt him. But as it turns out, he was diagnosed with auditory processing problems. My other son had language processing problems, and I had learned as a layman that if the diagnostician at school says the word processing, it means there's something wrong with your brain and there's nothing that can be done. And so when I heard auditory processing problems, it was rather discouraging. and I was told that by a speech therapist who did his intake that he had severe problems and that he would need speech and language therapy for years. She said probably till 5th grade, and she said it won't do much. It won't be able to help him much, but we have to try. And he had one, the intake and then one language therapy or speech therapy appointment before we left to go to Phoenix for our first listening training. So we put the headphones on him. And when we came back, the speech therapist had his second appointment, and she said, wow, you must have practiced a lot while you were gone because he has cleaned up 50% of his list. And I said, we didn't really because we were on vacation ignoring everything. And he had his second appointment 2 days later, and she said, I think I've misdiagnosed him. I don't think he's auditory processing. I think he has just some very unusual substitutions because he's cleaned up the rest of his list except for TH. And she said, TH is very hard. I don't think he'll ever get it. But I'm really happy that where he's gone, and I think he just has articulation errors. He had the weekend, and then the first day of the next week was his third appointment. He cleared up TH, and she released him from speech therapy. So things can really happen miraculously with listening training. I did my own listening program when my boys had done so well. And then a few years later, when my husband had a stroke, listening training brought back his voice. The speech therapist was able to get him to use his mouth and get some sound out again, but he sounded like a deaf person, sort of like this, with his voice very flat, and it was monotonous or monotonic. And when he would laugh, his laugh had always been a mellifluous, beautiful laugh. It's why I married him. But he sounded like a seal barking. And once the shock of the stroke wore off, I started thinking, now what do we do? And I contacted Dr. Thompson, who is the developer with her husband of Enlisten. And I said, is there anything that the listening can do for a stroke? And she sent me a portable machine. In 3 days, I was starting to hear the timbre of my husband's voice return. And at the end of 15 days, he was singing. So that's how I've used it in my own family. Bob Rotar, who is about to start speaking, his experience was that they had a friend whose son benefited from listening, but he was skeptical about it. But because they're friends, he was interested, learned about the technology. And then the mom of that little boy opened an Enlisten center in Alabama, and she wanted to do an outreach in Knoxville. And so Bob and Alice decided to help her with that. And after they saw in person the kind of changes they were getting, they opened the Listening Center in Knoxville to help others. So I'd like you to meet Bob Rotar, the president of Advanced Listening Solutions, and he will talk about his experience with Enlisten. Can you take the ball, Bob?
I sure can. If you'll change it over to me, I'll gladly do that.
Trying to my thing has kind of minimized here.
Uh-oh.
Can you take it or not?
Yeah, let me try to grab it from you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There, that's better.
We'll go down over here, and we do this, and then we do that, and I have to go. I wonder if we're still being recorded. That would be the other thing that we have to figure out here, and I still...
you go ahead and press recording. It looks like mine is recording still.
Okay, great. All right, so we're ready to go. So thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to David also for letting us present this program to you tonight. This is myself, this is Bob, and this is my wife Alice. And as you can tell, Bob has definitely married up, and Alice is definitely a beautiful woman, and I love her very much. We started a listening center here in Knoxville back in April of 2010, and we did it, as Marian said, after an outreach that was done by Angie Marshall, who's an Enlisten consultant in Alabama. She came up here, and we had such a good experience with that we decided to open the center. This is our website. You all are welcome to go there. It's tlcknoxville.com, and the Enlisten website is enlisten.com. And there's lots of good information on there. What you don't get tonight, if you go to these centers, you'll definitely learn more about it. And there is going to be a quiz towards the middle of the program, and you all can see that funny-looking shape there up in the right-hand corner, and I'm going to ask you what that is. And if anybody knows, just feel free to go to the questions section. You should have a place in there on your screen where you can ask questions. Just go ahead and type it in there. If you think you know what that is, just go ahead and type your answer in there. We opened in April of 2010, as I said. We've worked with over 65 students at the center, children and adults. We've worked with typical, people that would be described as typical. We've worked with a gifted student as well. But we've worked a lot with developmental kids. And we got involved with this one of the things that we want to do is I saw this technology helping these children. I said we have to open the center. There's just no doubt about it. This technology is needed here in East Tennessee, and I'm going to talk about a little later on about sound and the emerging field of sound, and just how important sound is. We know that this technology works. We want to spread the word about Enlisten so more people can be helped. In fact, if any of you out there in the audience want to become an Enlisten practitioner, please contact us. Go to the Enlisten website. Go to my website at TLC Knoxville. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about becoming a consultant in your area, because we need more consultants, because we want to get more help out there to kids and to adults that need this kind of training. This is a picture here of Scott. Scott is a 7-year-old child, little boy that came to us. His mom came to us at Angie's Outreach, in fact. And he started a program with us. He's autistic, and he had very little communication, very little speech with his mom or his siblings or at school. And he was not potty trained. 7 years old, and was not potty trained. And within 2 programs, he was potty trained, and Mom and Dad were exceptionally happy about that. And there was one incident that happened with the equipment. We sent the equipment to him, and for some reason something wasn't working, and his mom had to call me and say, well, I can't get this to work. And she was upset, and she started crying, and little Scotty looked at her and said, Mama, don't cry. I love you. And when she told us that story, it was just absolutely, that's the first time in 7 years that he had told her that he loved her. So that was just absolutely outstanding. And there's 65 other stories, because we have 65 kids, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the stories, but they're great. They're great stories, and as I like to say, there's I don't know how many people have been trained, have had listening training with this program. I think Billy has done Dr. Thompson has done over 7,000 children and adults. So there's 7,000 case studies out there, in addition to the 30 other practitioners or 40 other practitioners that use Enlisten across the country. They probably have an equal number. So there's maybe 15,000 different cases out there that demonstrate that this technology works. Another reason why we got involved was the growth in the numbers of kids with developmental problems. And this is some of the information that's out there. An estimated 1 in 88 children in the United States have autism. This is the latest figure from the CDC just this month that was released. Last year it was 110. In 1986 it was 1 in 10,000. So that incidence of that particular neurological dysfunction has grown quite a bit, and there's lots of reasons why. Some people, think it might be related to certain things, but we don't really know for sure. 9% of school-age children have dyslexia. That's the National Institute of Health, and the National Institute of Mental Health says 3 to 5% of school-age children have ADHD. And the Sensory Processing Foundation, Disorder Foundation, says 1 in 6 children is affected by sensory processing disorder. So you can see there is a lot of things going on out there that are not good for the country, not good for our kids, and certainly need to be addressed, on an immediate basis. I don't know if you all are familiar with TED Talks. If you have an iPhone, you can pick up the app on your iPhone or iPad, or you can go to TED.com. But there's a very interesting TED Talk from a PhD researcher over at Harvard. Her name is, I'm going to mess this up, Aditi Shankardas, and she's from India. And the title of her dissertation, not dissertation, but her program here is A Second Opinion on Learning Disabilities. And she makes a very good point about how we diagnose these neurological dysfunctions, in that we diagnose them by a behavior scale. And she says in her research that a lot of kids that have some of these problems, ADHD and autism and dyslexia, really have something else going on in their brain. And the diagnosis, we need to be using a neurological diagnosis, not a behavioral diagnosis, to be more accurate with this. And I agree with her 100%. And if she'd return my emails, I would try to get this technology going. But anyway, the technology that we're talking about today, the Enlisten technology, is not new. It has been used for a long, long time. It's been used with thousands of children and adults in many different states and countries. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Billy Thompson, is in Europe right now. She's presenting over there. She's presented in China. I don't know if she's been to Australia. She may have been there. But she presents all over the world. She presents here in the United States as well. The technology started probably before 1950. I just put that down as a date with Dr. Alfred Tomatis, who is a French ear, nose, and throat doctor who won many awards for his writings and his research. The awards were all, excuse me, from Europe. He developed something called the electronic ear, as Marian mentioned earlier, and used it with opera singers and then with children, and then from there, Dr. Thompson actually brought him to the United States and helped him open centers here in this country. So she's very familiar with his technology. And then Dr. Kirk Thompson, when the patents expired on Tomatis's electronic ear, they went and developed this technology even further. And the technology is based on stimulation of the ear and the neural pathways of the brain with sound frequencies. And let me just kind of turn it a little bit over here to sound and how important this is and what we're doing with sound, and just talk about applications of how we use sound technology today and some things that are going on in the future, not too far away. I really think this whole field of sound stimulation and using sound is just beginning. It's in its infancy right now, and you'll see lots of other applications as we move on, through the next decade or two. First of all, we already use sound with lithotripsy, which is for dissolving kidney stones. That technology has been around, I think, since the 70s. Of course, ultrasound has been around a long time. We use that to scan, take an ultrasound picture of a baby if a mom is pregnant. We use sonar. That's sound. That's for navigation and submarine navigation. The interesting thing, I saw this noise reduction using noise. The stereo, not the stereo, but the headphones you wear on an airplane has built-in noise reduction technology built into that. And what it does is it uses noise to cancel out noise, and you hear nothing, which is a great use of sound. Over in Japan, they're starting to use this technology along the roadways and railroad tracks to get rid of some of that type of noise. There's a new surgical technique out there called focused ultrasound, and it's not actually a new technology. It was developed back in the 1940s, I believe. It was never used because they couldn't really get it to the site where the problem was because they didn't have the technology. But now that we have MRI, they can actually use the focused ultrasound on tumors, There's another interesting talk here on TED.com. Yova Median, he's an Israeli. This technology is in use in Israel, I think, and in Europe right now, and it has limited use here in the United States. But that's the site that you can go to. It's another TED Talk, and it's very, very interesting. There's something going on in Japan right now with something called acoustic levitation. They're developing this technology using very high frequency sounds to actually levitate microchips in the processing process, because I guess handling the little chips, when people handle them, it's not good. So if they can levitate them and run them along the conveyor line, I guess, as they assemble these things, it's a lot better to do it that way. And this technology is being developed in Japan. And so look for that. There's as a treatment for tinnitus. I've got something on my Facebook, advancedlistening.com Facebook. I don't have it up here on the screen so you can't see it, but it's a video on using sound and what causes tinnitus, and it's just very interesting. And finally, for energy generation, there's actually some technology, some researchers looking at sound as a way to generate energy. So those are all the uses and future uses, I guess, of sound. We tend to think of sound in terms of, we look at it on an oscilloscope, and we see, at the top over here, we see these long waves over here, which are very low frequency sounds. And over here on the bottom, these are very high frequency sounds. And now frequency does not mean loudness. Frequency is just the wave pattern that we have in a high frequency and low frequency. There is another way to look at sound now. And this is very interesting. And this was the test I was talking to you about earlier. And this is through a cymoscope. And the cymoscope was developed in 2002 by a couple of researchers. And what they do is they have sound. They put sound in water or some alcohol or some kind of liquid, and they photograph it. Don't ask me how they do this. Don't ask me how the cymoscope works. I really don't know. But you can go to their website, and I'll put that up here in a minute. You can look at it. This is a triangle wave, a 14 hertz photograph through a cymoscope. This is that picture I had on the opening slide. It's a 14 hertz square wave. So this is a square wave. This is a sine wave sweep, as photographed there. And this is actually a cymoscope picture of a star. This is the sonic signature of star HR 3831-A. And this whole field is called cymatics. It was started by a guy by the name of Hans Jenny back in the 40s and 50s. And of course, the technology is now improved with the cymoscope. Jenny used to put sand on a plate, on a metal plate, and vibrate the plate. And so now we see that we can actually do this through the cymoscope. And there's a website there, cymoscope.com, and you can go on there and you can look at all these different pictures and read about the cymoscope and how it was developed and how it works and that kind of thing. So so we know that sound is very important, and there's another application and another, I guess this is a theory out here right now. It's called string theory. And some of you may be familiar with string theory. There's an excellent book on string theory written by Brian Greene. He is a theoretical physicist. He has a PhD in physics. It's called The Elegant Universe. If you're interested in reading the book, it's very, very interesting. There's actually a PBS program, a 3-part program on PBS on Nova, and that's the website there that you can go to right down here. And Dr. Green's theory and the people that are working on string theory, they say this may contribute to what's called the unified theory. And in the unified theory, and again, I'm not an expert in this area, there's two fields of physics. One is quantum mechanics, which deals with the subatomic universe, and then there's the Einstein theories of general and special relativity that deal with larger scale things, the universe. And apparently when you put these two together, they kind of collide. They don't work. And when you use string theory, which basically says that when you get down to the subatomic level and you get inside the smallest known particle, which is a quark, there's a string inside of the quark, and the string vibrates. It produces vibrational energy, and Dr. Green says it's producing music. He says these are different pitches and different frequencies that these little strings generate. And when you apply string theory to quantum mechanics and to the theories of relativity, apparently it unifies them, and those theories work. So that's kind of my overview on sound, and kind of taking you a little further away here with string theory. But I think it's important to know that sound is very, very important in every aspect of our life, and we need to really take it seriously. The title of our program, the Ear-Brain-Body Connection, is very appropriate because Enlisten is a sound stimulation program that delivers sound stimulation to the ear and the nervous system. And you've got to kind of look at the ear as the ear is to the nervous system what the conductor is to the orchestra. That's how important the ear is. It kind of makes everything work right. And if the ear isn't working right, then other things aren't working right as well. And that goes with your vestibular and your, the cochlear nerve, the vestibular nerve, the vagus nerve. All of these things get stimulated through the ear, and the ear has to orchestrate all of that. The ear processes sound frequencies, sends them to the brain for learning and language development, and this goes through your cochlear nerve. And as Marian said, it does it by both air and bone conduction, so it's two ways of getting that signal there. The ear transmits sound energy to the brain and the body through the vagus nerve located in the ear. The ear provides focus. It tells you what to focus on. And through the vestibule and the vestibular nerve, the ear senses movement, establishes balance, locates sound spatially, and integrates information from sound and motor movements to enable the development of coordinated movement and posture. You wouldn't be able to move if you didn't have a vestibule. There's people out there that don't have vestibules. It's gone bad, and they are in a perpetual state of falling. They always feel like they're falling, and even when they fall, they're laying on the ground, they still feel like they're falling. So that's an interesting phenomenon. So why use music? Why? Well, it works. Number one, and the Mozart effect. Don Campbell wrote that book, and it's a very good book. Talks about music and how music affects your brain. I've got a short 2-minute video here that I want you to watch, but I'm going to have to back out of the presentation and go into the working part of the presentation to put it up on the screen here. And the name of this video is music processing, and I think it's a very good overview of how this works. So let me just hit the escape button here, and let me go to music processing and hit this, and hope and pray that it comes up, which it did not. Okay, try it again. All right, let me do something here. If you all would just bear with me for 1 second. I need to go back to my desktop and find this this little. I'm so sorry that didn't appear. It doesn't look like I'm going to get back to my desktop.
somewhere in there, this gray thing inside of our head plays a role. The brain. For most of us, vibrations of sound waves are relayed to the brain through the ear, which converts them to neural signals.
As the sound hits the eardrum and it wiggles in and out, it sets up pressure waves inside a snail-like structure called the cochlea. The cochlea has hair cells lining it that are tuned to specific frequencies. So at one end, the hair cells only fire an electrical charge in response to low frequencies. At the other end, they fire an electrical charge in response to high frequencies, and of course everything in between.
So the signal goes from the ear to the brainstem and up into the brain.
And that electrical charge goes to the auditory cortex, which is amazingly laid out in pitch order, almost like a piano keyboard. The hair cells are wired to the auditory cortex in such a way that you've got low notes stimulating this part of the auditory cortex on up to high notes stimulating this part. We used to think that there was a music center in the brain. We don't think that anymore. There are music centers, and they're spread all over the brain.
The auditory cortex activates as it receives signals from the brainstem through the inferior colliculus and the medial geniculate nucleus.
If you could look at all the different areas of the brain involved in extracting the signal from sound and turn it into music, you'd see a bunch of coordinated and a bunch of uncoordinated firing in different parts of the brain, kind of like a neural symphony, a neural orchestra. So pitch is processed in one set of neural regions, tempo in another, loudness in another, timbre, whether it's a violin or a trumpet or a human voice, in yet another, and it all comes together later. The later in this case is maybe 30 thousandths of a second, so rapidly that you never knew the things were ever apart.
Well, I hope you all were able to see that and to hear that. Let me go back over to my slideshow. And oops, sorry about that. We did all that already, didn't we? Now let's talk a little bit about in-listen sound, which is different than other types of sound. And what makes in-listen sound different is that one of the things is filtering. And Marian mentioned this a little bit earlier on in her presentation, that the in-listen program lets in only certain frequencies of sound through the music program to selectively train those parts of the auditory spectrum where clients have trouble processing sound. So we're able to take a piece of music, and we're able to say, okay, we only want you to listen to sounds that are between this range, 250 to 750 hertz, or we want you to listen to all sounds over 750 hertz, or we want you to listen to all frequencies that are 2,000 hertz and below. And keep in mind, hertz is not decibel, so it's a wave pattern. It's just higher or lower sound. So the auditory stimulation programs are designed to filter frequencies in such a fashion as to strengthen the areas you most need to improve processing of the auditory spectrum. So it's a very different kind of sound. Okay, the in-listen sound also does a process called gating, and Marian talked about that a little bit too. And gating is kind of like ear aerobics, is the best way that I can describe it. Auditory stimulation programs make use of the gating function, and the impact is like doing internal ear aerobics. That's down here on the bottom. And simply what we're doing here is separating music into two channels. I wish Kirk were here explaining this, because he does a much better job. Dr. Kirk Thompson, he does a better job than I do. But it entails separating music into two channels and alternating or gating them, with one channel inducing passive hearing, and the other channel inducing focused listening, and thus strengthening the muscles of the middle ear, known to be responsible for focusing, tuning out unwanted sound. And this causes the muscle in the ear to continuously tighten and relax, a process that strengthens them. So it's a very good application. So Enlist Sound is definitely different than sound that you listen to on the radio or through a regular headset because of the bone conduction and because of the filtering and the gating processes that go on. The effects are that Enlist programs are auditory stimulation programs that train the ear, the brain, and the body and the pathways to better process sound input and function more efficiently. And the results can range from subtle to life-changing, and they certainly are life-changing in many cases, and in some cases they're a little more subtle, but they're changes nonetheless. And people do experience changes with this program. We've not had a student at our center that has not had some kind of an effect. It's not had some kind of an effect on. So the ear helps organize the development of the brain. The ear develops very early, as Marian said, and is the only, I think, at about 4.5 months gestation. And it's the only sensory system to be fully operational before birth. And this is kind of a controversial one here. Language integration begins in the womb with passive listening to the mother's voice during the last half of fetal development. And of course, a lot of people who understand how this all works say, well, what about myelination? The myelination process doesn't happen until after you're born. But there's actually now some research out there that kind of proves our point. And this research was done at the University of Montreal and the St. Justine University Hospital Research Center, and I believe it was 2010 that this was done. And what they did is they took 16 babies, newborns, while they were still sleeping, and they asked the mother to make a short vowel sound, A, and when they repeated it, and then they repeated the exercise with the female nurse who brought the baby to the lab to be hooked up to the EEG stimulation or the EEG machine. And when the mother spoke, the scans very clearly show reactions in the left hemisphere of the brain, and in particular the language processing and motor skills circuit. Conversely, when the stranger spoke, the right hemisphere of the brain reacted. The right hemisphere is associated with voice recognition. So the scans show that the left hemisphere of the brain is activated by the mother's voice, and the stranger, it's the right hemisphere. So there is some validity to that statement that the baby hears the mother, and Tamada said that back in the 50s, and lo and behold, we now have the technology to prove him correct. So the ear helps organize the development of the brain, and neural pathways connected to the ear are present in about 80% of the brain, which is another amazing finding and thing to talk about. We do have a case study, and I realize this is just a case study. This is not a research study. I guess our research that we have for Enlist is the thousands of case studies that we have for this program. There is some research on some of the other sound stimulation programs. This is Kyle. Kyle is a 6-year-old dyslexic boy, and the study was done at the Madonna Rehabilitation Institute in Lincoln, Nebraska. And this was they looked at Kyle's brain pre-Enlist training and post-Enlist training, and you can see here that Kyle's activation in his brain here during a reading task, his left visual cortex deactivates. And after his Enlist training, he has now robust activation, which supports visual word recognition. On the theta side, before his training, his pre-Enlist training, his right frontal activation is happening here, which is characteristic of a dyslexic pattern. After his Enlist training, you can see both sides are now bilateral activated, and it's a well-compensated dyslexic pattern. In terms of his connectivity of his brain, pre-training, his right auditory cortex is functionally disconnected. The blue lines means nothing's happening there. And after training, after his Enlist training, all connectivity relationships are now within normal limits. They tested Kyle with the test of auditory and perceptual skills, and they found pre and post, and they found the higher number here means he's reading fewer words backwards. He's reading less words backwards. His word memory has improved from 78 to 90, his interpretation of direction from 74 to 91, and his reading fluency from 87 to 99. So Kyle has done real well with his enlistment training, and we have some evidence here that he is functioning at a different level than he was prior to his training. So sound does activate the neural pathways, and when some sound frequencies are missing, then information is missed. It's that simple, and the enlistment program trains the ear and the brain to tune in to what is desired and tune out what is not. Helps the ear process sound better, and it helps process by air conduction, not bone conduction, and it helps the neural pathways in the brain get connected and stimulate those. And both the brain and the ear are necessary for good listening. Now, we also have a slide here showing the different sound frequencies and how these frequencies affect different things. And this is pretty interesting as well, because we see that low frequency sounds, those frequencies that are 750 hertz and below to whatever level the human ear can hear, those types of sounds, when you use those frequencies, they affect fine motor, and toileting, and balance, and appetite, sleep for our autistic kids, spinning and horseplay. And we see a lot of these things get better in the kids that come through our program who have autism, and especially the toileting and the spinning and the horseplay issues. The motor skills. I just had a young boy. Just met with his mom today. He's 8 years old. He has Asperger's, and he's done 2 programs. And mom is just elated because he's now his handwriting. She can read it, and she showed me before and after. And she's monitoring this herself, and she's saying, look at this and look at this, and she's saying, look at this picture and look at this picture. The pre-enlistment picture is sticks, basically stick people and everything made from lines. After 60 hours of enlistment training, the picture is of I don't know, Mr. Cucumber, a cartoon figure, I guess, on TV. I don't know, I'm not familiar with that one, but it's an actual cucumber, big. It's got depth, it's got shape, it's got form, it's got colors, and she said all the colors are in the right place too, by the way. So, so we've been stimulating him with some of these low frequencies and helping him in those areas. When he moves along in the program a little bit, we're going to start stimulating him with some of these middle frequencies, 1,000 to 3,000 hertz, and you can see those affect things like language and cognitive skills and planning and multi-step instructions and magnitude and theory of mind issues. And then frequencies that are above 3,000 to 3,000 to 12,000, somewhere in that range, affect your energy and mood and sound sensitivity and transition and coping skills, and help to reduce anxiety. And so we have a lot of that. We're able to use these frequencies and to use this technology that the Thompsons have developed to help these kids in so many ways. It's just absolutely amazing what this technology does. Enlistment programs stimulate the neural pathways in the brain. They get the body connected to the brain, which a lot of times it's not, and that's why the toileting issues happen. The kids simply don't feel the urge to go to the bathroom. It just happens, and we can have that happen. I had one dad tell me it's like a pay raise, like getting a pay raise. They don't have to buy pull-ups anymore. I said that'll pay for the enlistment program itself. So we're strengthening the muscles, the stapedius muscles in the middle ear, so the ear can focus better. Developing air over bone conduction, and getting the air dominance in there, and creating right ear dominance. And Marian explained that. So the brain needs stimulation to be able to enable the thinking processes and the development of intelligence. And there's a saying in the field of neuroplasticity: neurons that fire together wire together, and that is so very true. And the neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change in ways that enhance learning. The brain is not, it used to be thought that you got to about age 9 or 10, and that was it. That's what you had to work with in terms of your brain, and that that is simply not true. There's ample research out there to support neuroplasticity, and we all, there's lots of good books out there that you can read. You can do a Google search on that topic and see all kinds of things. The brain changes constantly, and what you do affects what your brain does. In other words, it's kind of like, if you want to exercise your arms, you exercise your arms. Your legs don't gain in strength, your arms do. If you want to exercise certain parts of your brain, you have to exercise those certain parts, or they get weak and something else will take over. The brain is a very competitive environment. So this neuroplasticity is, however, greatest during the first 8 years of life, but it does continue. So the implication for listening training is definitely to start now. And of course, changes take place, over time. Neural connections develop and happen slowly through repeated stimulation, and that's why these programs are 2 hours a day, 15 days, and then there's an integration period, and then another we call it an intensive. I'll just call it a program for now, but they do another intensive. So. And that's why listening training, takes more than a few days, and why for people with long-standing difficulties, more can be gained through longer programs. So, listen definitely provides stimulation to fuel growth. And the ear is an integrator of sensory information, and we use our ears to learn about absolutely everything. It's absolutely amazing. And programs are available for anybody. Children, adults, business professionals, seniors. You can be developmental, or you can be typical. You can be gifted. We've had one gifted child go through our program. This was an interesting case. She's a 13-year-old honor student. She was struggling with math. She went to some of the learning centers and helped her a little bit, but Mom said still not happening for her in math, and her reading isn't, she has to work really hard. It takes her a long time to read books, and there was a little bit of conflict in the home because these are two very smart. Mom's a veterinarian and Dad is a mechanical engineer, so they have high expectations for their daughter, and there was a little bit of confrontation in the home because things just weren't progressing as they thought they should. So they found out about us, and they brought her into the center, and we did the sound stimulation, the Enlisten program with her. And after she was done with her training, I got a call from her dad. Her dad said, "This stuff really works." He said, "I thought this was, In fact, he stood up. This was funny. He went to a conference where Dr. Billy Thompson was, and he stood up and he said, "I just thought this stuff was a bunch of hooey." He said, "But I saw it work in my daughter. She is reading books in 2 days now that used to take her 2 weeks." And he said, "She's now on the A honor roll. She's getting A's in math. She never got A's in math before." And he said that in front of 40 people, and I didn't pay him to go there either. I mean, he just stood up and did it. He was so excited about it. And but we found out later that last year, after she completed her program in April of last year, and then during the summer of 2011, she got invited to Kansas State University in an architecture program. As it turns out, the Enlisten program also helped her get more creative, and so she went there for 2 weeks and worked on different projects and things with the people there. So that was kind of exciting. And of course, we owe all of this technology to two people. Dr. Billy Ann Thompson. She is the founder of Sound Listening Corporation, the developer of Enlisten programs and the assessment and program decision model. And I'm sure Kirk will appreciate me saying that he was involved in this decision model as well. It's an excellent tool. Billy provided Tomatis and Enlisten programs to over 6,500 children and adults. So she's got the background in 30 cities. She's the founding president of the International Association of Tomatis Practitioners, first exclusive U.S. trainer for Tomatis, the editor of the English translation of 2 of Tomatis' books. He wrote 12. Only 3 of his books have been translated into English. 2 of them that Billy did the translation, worked with editor on, were the conscious ear and the ear and language. Dr. Kirk Thompson is a PhD PE, and he's also a Listen founder. He's Vice President of Sound Listening and President of the Quincy Street Corporation, software development and engineering consulting company, founded in 1976. He's the creator of all Enlisten technology and provides technology training for Enlisten professionals. And like I said, he could have done a much better job than me tonight. But Dr. Thompson is also a frequent presenter at conferences and serves on several engineering standards boards. His MS is from MIT, back there in the Massachusetts, and his PhD is from Arizona State University. So Enlisten is changing our view of what is possible for human development, and I know right now you're probably feeling like this little boy here in the red sweater. Mr. Osborne, may I be excused? My brain is full. Hopefully we filled it up good for you tonight. I'm going to turn it back over to Marian, and Marian is going to wrap things up. If you've got questions, please give us your questions, and we'll be happy to stick around for another half an hour and answer any questions that you have. Thank you all very much.
Hello, I'm back. I'd like to. I'm looking at. I've got a hand raised here from Karen Rosenberg. We don't have anybody except Bob and I running this thing tonight, so I guess what you're supposed to do is type your question into the question box. So if Karen is available to type it, or if anybody else has an interest in typing a question. Oh, Anita Lewis says, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Well, I appreciate that very much, Anita. Anita is a friend of mine. I'm glad she came. And let's see, I'm not sure what this one means. Iris, by a question by Gary Webb has a question, but I don't understand the question. So if you're still there, Gary, if you want to type it in again, I would appreciate that. I've got a client that is a 10-year-old who is listening now, or she's actually in her integration period now. And when she started, her mom, who is a teacher, said that at her 4th grade level, she was really not performing at much above a 2nd grade level. But the other day, she had to write a paper, and her mom, being an English teacher, gave her the outline of how to write a paper, you know, an introduction and a conclusion, and then 3 parts in the middle. And she said she didn't do much except write little empty blocks and saying, fill these blocks. And when her daughter got to work on it, and she wrote this wonderful paper that her mom, actually, being an English teacher of high schoolers, she says, I check for plagiarism every time I check. And she didn't find this paper anywhere, and she asked her daughter, where did this paper come from? And her daughter said, it came from me. And she just is thrilled. She said that she would have given this paper a very high score if she were grading it in her high school class. And that's a big change for listening for 15 days. She's really doing well. She was also very clumsy and uncoordinated. And she would fall. She would pinch her fingers. She would drop things. She'd fell out of bed. She'd run into walls. And since she started listening, they actually went over to, on spring break, they went to SeaWorld and Six Flags Over Texas to just have a holiday from home. And her mom said that during a trip like that, she would have normally fallen and hurt herself 5 times. And she said she didn't fall even once. And she's only, in all these days since she started listening in March, she's pinched her finger 1 time. And that's the only injury she's gotten. That's what happens when the vestibule starts working. You know where you are in space. You know what your body's doing. And you don't get hurt. Do you have any stories to tell, Bob, while we're waiting for any questions?
Yeah, we've got, as I mentioned, 65 students that have been through the program, and there's a number of stories that we have and cases that we have that, we have a 47-year-old lady who is, she's Asperger's, and she always felt that she had some problems and just didn't know what they were. She's never been diagnosed, and I think she's kind of figured it out on her own if that's what she has, and she's gone through our training. She did 3 enlistment programs, and she is now able to multiply. She was never able to multiply before. She can divide. She can write checks. She was never able to write checks before. She can wrap presents, gifts. She was never able to wrap. She couldn't maneuver her hands in the paper. She is dressing different. She's got more confidence. She's had lots of other things. She just sent me an email about all the changes that have been happening to her, and she's just so excited that she's now feeling her presence, I guess, if you will, that she has confidence. And here's another interesting thing. Of course, her husband was skeptical, as most guys are. Us guys are just really, really skeptical about these things, and he's another one. I saw him several weeks ago, and he said, this stuff really works. He said, Penny is just so different. She is so much improved.
Yeah, and, I have finally figured out the question box here.
Okay.
I've got a question here. It says, has any diseases of the brain like ALS or MS been affected by this? Are you aware of any of this, Bob?
I am not, no. There may be some other practitioners out there who have dealt with that and have used the training for that. I'm just not aware of that.
Yeah, now this is by Brenda Bechtold. Brenda, the website here, www.enlisten.com, has a lot of information that you can go and look, and you might be able to find something on that, but I don't have experience with ALS or MS myself, and I don't know how to answer that question. I'm sorry. Do we have any centers in Canada? If you go to the enlisten.com website, there's a find a list of practitioners, and there are, I know that we've got some in Mexico, and I think there's somebody in Canada, but I believe it's on the East Coast. And Anita says, my daughter did the program for learning Spanish. Please explain how it helps you learn a language. One of the things that Bob was talking about is the way the baby hears the mother's voice in the womb. It prepares that child feels the rhythm of the mother's voice and is getting the frequencies that she's speaking, and each language has its own sonic envelope, if you will, the frequencies that the language is spoken in. And what we do at the listening training is to present an English speaker, for example, the frequencies of a person who speaks, for example, Spanish, Mexican-type Spanish, as their native language, and they will listen to the sounds filtered appropriately over a period of 30 to 60 hours to soften them up for it, and they'll listen to children's music in Spanish and Spanish stories being read by a woman, because of course women are the ones who have babies, and so that's why they use woman's voice. And this will prepare the person to receive the language of that they're trying to acquire the way the baby in a Spanish womb would have acquired it. So we don't teach Spanish, but we can help them develop the ability to to acquire Spanish very quickly. Oh, and I've got somebody here who has done some listening. I believe she did some listening with Dr. Thompson. She said, truly awesome presentation and brings back memories of doing it in Listen. I think my ear needs a tune-up. Would tinnitus affect the and listen program? Terrence asked that question. I can speak to this because I have very bad tinnitus. We have to use lower frequencies on a person who has tinnitus. We have to be a little bit careful about which frequencies, and we test it on you a little bit. But you can have a listen program with tinnitus. I don't know that we can affect tinnitus in a positive way. I'm not sure that we can get rid of it because mine would be gone if we could. But you can certainly develop, use and listen for other uses while you have tinnitus. It's not a contraindication. Bob, are you aware if this process has been used with military personnel and or veterans?
I'm sure there are some that have used it. I have not. Oh, and also regarding tinnitus or tinnitus, the article that I read about it, and the research article that I read on it, said tinnitus is a lot like phantom limb. If you lose a limb, you still feel that limb that's been lost. And if you lose a particular frequency, your auditory cortex wants to hear it. And that's where the tinnitus comes from. And it's kind of interesting, and the article explains a little bit about how to deal with that. But regarding the military, I am not aware of anybody. I have not had a veteran come to us for training. No.
Yeah, I don't see any reason for them not to because of other people who have been exposed to harsh sounds, stressful environments, the sort of psychic shock that a soldier might encounter. This has happened to other people who have benefited from listening training. So I would see it's not a contraindication. It's just in my experience and in Bob's experience, we haven't had any. Gary Webb says, Simoscope image does not look like an iris, as I guessed. Bob, he was trying to pass the test, Bob.
Oh, that's somebody.
Bob asked for it at the beginning of his talk, so he thought that was an iris. Thanks, Gary.
An iris.
Yeah. Do you have any consultants on the west coast of Canada? Faye, go to www.enlisten.com and look on the Find a Practitioner, and you'll find all of the people that we have at the moment. And contact them if you've got any questions. A lot of us travel or work at a distance. I've got a guy in Colorado. I'm in Texas. I'm in the Houston area. I have a fellow in Colorado. I've got a fellow in Alaska. You've recognized him from the Yuki Gassen team. And because the way Kirk Thompson wrote the program, the whole thing fits on a laptop now. You have to have a real screamer. You got to have a very fast processor, but you can pack that thing in a FedEx box and send the headphones and all the various wires that are necessary and ship it off to somebody. So being on the west coast of Canada, it's not necessary to actually have access to an Enlisten center or a practitioner close at hand. Some of the consultants, one being Doreen Day she's in New Jersey, I believe. She's near New York City. She does a lot of research, and we were at a training session, and she asked me what I would want from a listening program, and I told her, and she said, well, from what you've told me you want, I can predict what your listening test would look like. So though we prefer to see a person, to actually have physical contact with you to get your intake and your listening test and all that, it's possible to work without those things. So just because there might not be somebody close by, check the website. Their email contact addresses. Mine is down here, marian.booker@gmail.com, and Bob's is bob@advancedlistening.com, and we can help you find somebody, or might be able to help you ourselves. Bob Chamberlain says, what is the best way to get some more information? I have a clinic for healing and use various frequency equipment. Would love to incorporate this. Thank you. Well, again, Bob, I would recommend the website, or you could email one of us. We can see what you've got and perhaps send you to a person who would be the best one to help you. We'd be glad to help you with that. And could this be used with someone who has otosclerosis in one ear? Bob, I don't see a problem, but I would talk to Dr. Thompson about that before giving an absolute answer. Do you have any experience with that, Bob?
We do not. No, I'm sorry. That would be a Dr. Thompson question as to whether or not it would help. It's you know, it may.
Okay, Gary Webb is a skeptic. How really does hearing affect handwriting? Well, hearing doesn't affect handwriting. Listening affects handwriting. And the vestibule, the cochlea, and the semicircular canals, that whole apparatus is stimulated during listening because we have the bone conduction. Remember the bone conduction device on the back of the headphones? That's feeding the vestibule directly by touching the bone on the mastoid bone right behind your ear, and so that vestibular stimulation, that need for the vestibular stimulation, is being quenched by the bone conduction device. And handwriting is a process that needs good vestibular control, and because we feed the vestibule, the handwriting comes along. It's just that's the way it happens. And when I was taking my son for sensory integration therapy, they try to affect these things by putting child in a net swing and on various platforms to where their body has to adapt to the changes in motion. You know, the little otoliths and things in the semicircular canals move around to where that tells your head, my head is not straight, so you turn your head until you feel like it's straight. Well, that's the little, you can say there are little rocks in there that you know, land in a certain place, and if they are touching the bottom, then you know that you're sitting upright. But if those things are not working properly, there are ways to work with that, and one is, you know, with sensory integration therapy is the one that I'm most familiar with. But that whole thing is to get that vestibule to work, and we do it very directly with the bone conduction and with sometimes miraculous results. This one's for Bob. My 13-year-old daughter still wets the bed in her sleep at night. Have you ever heard of this program helping this problem? Leslie.
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes. And we've had a number of those that have come to us that have that problem, and you know, usually we're able to help. So it's you know, it's there's some behavior issues there as well, probably, and you'll probably have to discover what those are and deal with those. But you know, she's just not if she's just not feeling it, the Enlisten program can help with that very definitely.
Can you, Bob, how, Gary wonders how hearing really affects handwriting. How does listening really affect your sphincter?
Well, it's not the listening that affects your sphincter. It's the stimulation of the vagus nerve is what we're doing, because that vagus nerve is in the ear as well, and that nerve goes right down to the colon. Into the bladder. It's connected to every organ in the body, and when you stimulate that nerve with the lower frequency, you see some pretty amazing changes.
Thank you. I am 66 and have been experiencing blank spaces in conversation and have to come up with a similar word or have someone else fill in the blank. Will Enlisten help this? Do you have an opinion, Bob?
Well, at 66 years old, again, I would be concerned about some other condition, perhaps, you know, early stage Alzheimer's or dementia or something along those lines, if those things are happening. So I would definitely get tested for that. You know, we're going through that here in Tennessee right now, in the state of Tennessee, with Pat Summit, who's our basketball coach, who was diagnosed last year with early onset dementia, and so it would be very, very well for you to you know, to get that checked out. Can we help with that? Dr. Thompson would say that she has worked with Alzheimer's and people that have early onset dementia, and has seen some improvement, but it takes a while.
It's also I've actually got some people who have worked with this, and I always tell them, like you did, rule out something that is more, make sure that we don't have something bad going on. But then we would do a listening test and do an intake on you and see what your picture looks like. Because when we do the laterality test, the listening test, and you fill out your questionnaire and we do your drawing tests, by evaluating the whole picture, once we get that whole picture, we can tell whether you're a candidate for a listening program, and whether this isn't going to be the thing to work for you. So it's worth an ask, but make sure there's not something deeper going on there. And Gary wants to know how much education, training, and cost to become a practitioner. I think that that's something that you would want to discuss with Dr. Thompson. Contact her through www.enlisten.com. There's probably a question, at a contact us page, because they're the ones that are in charge of that. And my training has been several years ago, and I know what I paid then. I don't know what they're paying now. So I know there are educational requirements, but I don't know the full suite of education requirements that are necessary. So I'm not much of a help for you on that, Gary, but I would recommend contacting them through the website. I think I've come to the end of the questions on this list, so if anybody has anything else, fire away here. Otherwise, Bob and I could sit and tell stories again for a while. Oh, we've got dead air. Do you have let's see, did we get another one?
Should we get Karen's question? Karen Rosenberg?
Let me see. I don't see that one. Do you?
I see your hand up.
Okay. Do you see the question?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, well, I'm trying to figure this out here. I'm sorry. We apologize. We're doing the best we can. Okay. I don't see that one. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, it was just she had her hand up, and
okay. Yeah,
she may not have a question. So.
Okay. Have you got another story to tell, Bob? I go on and on with stories, but you've got a lot of them too. With your,
yeah.
I mean, you've potty trained quite a few kids there at your center, haven't you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we had a little boy in Charlotte, North Carolina, that a little 8-year-old autistic boy that wasn't potty trained when he got to the center. He, typical, autism, spinning, and the proprioception issues, and the meltdowns, and the sound sensitivities, and the eating sensitivities, and the whole clothes sensitivities. I mean, he was in, he was pretty classic, and now, we got a note from Mom saying, we took a vacation, he was on the plane, he didn't have a meltdown, he doesn't have any potty accidents, he interacts, we went to Jamaica where his grandparents are, and he had fun with them on the boat, and, and she's just as happy as she can be. She's, and then so am I for her, that her little son is now functioning at quite a different level than he was when he first got with us. And again, that's another one of those that was out of town, and so we use a questionnaire. It's a 20-some page questionnaire, and it starts before birth and goes all the way till now, and so it's pretty detailed and it's pretty lengthy. So we get a lot of good information out of there to write these programs. And so, like Marian said, that the listening test isn't absolutely necessary to do an enlistment program.
Yeah, when my son was going through listening, he was in 3rd grade, and he had the most wonderful teacher that year. He knew that my son had difficulties, and he had just come from Minnesota, and he was quite good at handling large classes and children with different needs, and he had always made them very welcome. And my son, we truly didn't feel very welcome in the school that we were in, but he told me, don't worry, I'll take care of him. And a friend who had been his aide in a second grade class wasn't sure about this new guy, and she would pass by that room and she would report to me how it was going. And she told me that every time she walked by, this guy was either standing right by his desk talking and giving the whole class, or he was directly helping him. And we knew that he was in very good hands. But at that time, if he would not get the question when the class was asked the question, that he would have to ask the class the question, and then he would have to ask my son the same question, because he just didn't pick it up in the class. And we left for 6 weeks and got 45 hours of listening, and we had to make another trip to get the last bit. But when we came back, the teacher called me and he said, we were doing math today and your son's hand went up and he had the answer. And the room got noisy, and when he normally would kind of come unglued in that sort of situation, instead this time he raised his hand and said, Mr. Geisenhoff, this room is very noisy. May I do my work on that little desk out in the hall? And that's worth $1 million when that sort of change happens, because suddenly they're not in their own little world. They're starting to interact with their classmates. They're getting something from the education, and they're starting to feel competent within themselves, and it's a very gratifying thing when you start seeing this sort of change happen. And when the stroke happened to my husband, it was devastating, of course, and to have this man who used to sing in a quartet suddenly not be able to even really speak. We thought this was going to be life from then on, but Dr. Thompson knew what to do. She knew what kind of a program to send. She didn't do a listening test or anything. She said, oh, I know what he needs. And so she sent a program that did what he needed. And when he put the headphones on and we started seeing the changes so quickly, and then at the end of 15 days, his normal voice had returned and his ability to sing and everything, it was like getting a new lease on life. I don't have the right words for it. It's just hard to say. But I've got a fellow that I've talked to about a listening program. Actually, I talked to his wife about it because he's an FBI agent, but not anymore because he had a massive stroke and he can't speak anymore and he can't read anymore. But he does know that he was an FBI agent. He can speak some. He just spits out a few very, very troublesome words. But he understands what's going on. And when he tries to talk to you, he'll point at himself and say, it taps himself on the chest and he says, FBI, like I was in the FBI. And I'm talking with them about trying a program. We don't know if a 9-year-old stroke can be affected, but I feel like I have a life ring and he's a drowning man. And so I need to throw that life ring and just see. Maybe we can make a change to that. Dr. Thompson was interviewed by a show called Sightings that it's been quite a few years ago that show was on. I think it was on Sci-Fi Channel. But there was a guy that came into her center in Phoenix who had a massive stroke, and they worked with him for a while, and he got much, much better. And one of the ladies at the center, Joan, said when that guy came in, he could barely string 2 words together, and by the time he left, he was speaking well and had hope for the future. So I think that it's always worth a try. Do you have anything else to add, Bob?
We've had, we deal at our center mostly with children. I mean, we do have some adults in the program as well, and we do get some referrals every now and then from speech and language pathologists and occupational therapists, which is very nice. And we got a referral several months ago, a little boy who was stuttering really bad. listening test on him. Actually, we did not do a listening test on him. We had the mom fill out a questionnaire, and after his first program, his first 30 hours, and this was 6 months ago now, the stuttering stopped, and he today, I just saw him this week, and he's just doing great. And Mom says his handwriting, again, his motor skills have improved greatly. His confidence is a lot better. She said, the stuttering is not there anymore. It's 100% gone. She said he's reading books now. He's asking to read books now, and he's never done that before. And so she's just excited about all the changes that are happening for him. And it's just so gratifying to see when this happens. And I don't want to lead anybody astray on this. Sometimes we have kids that come in, and we see very little progress for them. And I can't explain that. I don't know why that happens. There are some changes, but there's just not what the level of change that the parents wanted to see. But there's still some things that have happened, and so we do always see some things that have happened. It's just the degrees are different, and it's different for different children. So.
Okay, well, we're down to about 3 minutes from the end, and I don't know if GoToWebinar just unplugs you when the time comes, or unceremoniously, but or what?
I think it might. It just shuts you right off. That's it.
Okay.
Well, is there anybody listening out there?
Oh yeah,
we still have attendees.
We've still got attendees. Yes, we do.
That's good. That's great. I'm glad you all came tonight to listen to our presentation, and we really appreciate your being here. For those of you who have friends out there that could benefit from this training, please let them know. This talk is available on the website, I believe. Is it not, Marian?
Pardon me?
This talk that we did tonight, this webinar, is available on the website.
I believe it's being recorded, and I believe It's available on the Building Strength webinars, but I'm not certain if it's free or if you need to be a member to see the recording. I don't know the chapter and verse on that.
Yeah, but anyway, it's there, or if you give them our contact information, they can contact us. We can give them more information. They can go to my website, tlcknoxville.com, and get information off of there, or go to the Enlisten website, enlisten.com, and get information there. So.
And Gary has very helpfully told us that we have to sign off to end the webinar, which we will do in a minute or two. And Bob thanks us for the presentation. He really enjoyed it. Well, Bob, we appreciate your attendance. And Gary, you too. You're a help. I appreciate the time that all of you have spent tonight, and hope that this causes you to think about possibilities for yourself or for friends or family members, children that you know, children that you see. We've been able to help people from about 2 years on up to old age, 80 years old, 85, doesn't matter. So there can be something for about everybody who needs help in the areas that we've discussed. So you can go to www.enlisten.com for more information. You can email me, Marian Booker, at marian.booker@gmail.com, or you can email Bob Rotar, bob@advancedlistening.com. Bob will be giving another webinar in May, I believe.
In May. It's going to be towards the end of May now.
Toward the end of May. And I'm scheduled to do another one in June. I've got finals coming up, so I need to finish those and do some studying. So I've got to get my head down for now. But we appreciate all of your attendance, and if I can figure out how to end this thing, I'll say goodbye, and thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you all very much.